Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a sew along to one of my new summer patterns with Simplicity, Simplicity 9946. I love this dress. You have two bodice options, an open back and a fully covered back. And then you have two length options on the skirt. You have a knee length and you have a ankle length. I'm going to be doing view A, which is the open back, with the skirt from view B, which is the long skirt. You can mix and match these however you want. You might want the full back bodice with a short skirt, or you might want it as you see it on the pattern envelope. It really just depends on you. Again, I'm going to be doing the open back view with the long skirt. Now let's go ahead and go over the pattern pieces you're going to need to cut, and let's get started. All right, guys, so we're going to be working on Simplicity 9946, and just to reiterate, I'm going to be doing the view A for the bodice, but the view B for the skirt, just because I want a long skirt. If you want the shorter version, you simply just need to cut the skirt pattern at the cut line. I also want to remind you that on the back of your pattern envelope, you're always going to have a list of suggested fabrics along with any notions that you're going to need. In this case, for bodice A, we're going to need a 1/4 inch elastic and also a 12-inch invisible zipper. Now let's go over the pattern pieces you're going to need to cut. You're going to cut pattern piece number 6. This is our bodice back. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. I'm using my actual fashion fabric also for the lining, so I'm using the same fabric. But if you're using a different lining fabric, then you would cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. You're also going to cut pattern piece number 1. This is our bodice front for view A. You're going to cut 2 of fabric and 2 of lining. You're going to cut pattern piece number 5. This is our front inset for both view A and B, and you're going to cut 2. You're going to cut pattern piece number 10. This is our pocket. You're going to cut 4, so either you're cutting 2 of fabric and 2 of lining, or 4 of fabric. You're going to cut pattern piece number 7. This is our back strap for view A, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to cut pattern piece number 8. This is our skirt back for both views A and B, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to cut pattern piece number 9. This is the skirt side back for both view A and B, and you're going to cut 2. Also, I want to point out to make sure that you are placing your grain line correctly. You'll notice that there's a slight bias on this. Okay, you're also going to cut pattern piece number 4. This is our biggest pattern piece, and you're going to cut 2. This is the front for both A and B. I want to make sure and point out that it's really important that you transfer all of your notches, dots, circles, all of it. It's going to be very helpful as you're constructing the dress. Now, pattern piece 2, you are not cutting out of fabric, you are cutting 2 out of interfacing. We're going to interface this piece to our front bodice pieces. And pattern piece 3 is just your elastic guide, so you don't need to cut the entire pattern accurately. You just need it so that you can measure from your size to the end so you know what size elastic to cut. This is what the front bodice pieces look with the fused interfacing on it. You're going to interface it to your fabric. If you're using a separate lining, you're not interfacing it to the lining, you're only interfacing it to your main fabric. Now, once you have everything cut out and your bodice front pieces interfaced, we can start sewing. Let's go ahead and start with our straps. You're going to go ahead and fold it lengthwise with right sides facing, and we're going to pin along the long edge. Okay, now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to head to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch this. Okay, go ahead and trim your seam allowance. And turn your strap right side out. Okay, I want you to give it a good press. You're going to do your other strap the same way. Okay, now let's go ahead and attach our strap to our bodice front. So I've got my bodice front piece here. I want to make sure that you transferred some dots. So we have a stopping point dot here where we're going to be stitching when we place our lining over our main fabric. Also, it's not in the instructions, but I found it to be much more helpful, is I also transferred a dot here at the bottom. That's also 5/8 of an inch from the cut edge. That's where we're going to stop stitching along the bottom. So I did want to point that out. I just found it was easier to do it that way. Now you're going to go ahead and place your strap over your bodice. You're going to use the flat side. You have an angled side. The flat side is going to go on the shoulder in between your dots. And you want to make sure that the angle of your strap is facing the center front. You don't want it to be like that, right? So where the point is pointing towards your side seam. So make sure that you're placing it correctly. and go ahead and pin. Okay, now really quickly, head to your sewing machine and just tack this down. Okay, now I want you to go ahead and grab your lining piece, and with right sides facing, we're gonna go ahead and place it over the top. Let's go ahead and pin at the shoulder. We're gonna go ahead and pin along the front. And remember that we have a dot. I have it both on my lining and my main fabric just to remind myself. So I'm going to put a pin right through that dot. We're going to go ahead and pin along the arm. And you want to make sure that your strap is not caught. So I'm actually going to tuck it to the inside because we're also going to stitch along the bottom. And remember, I told you to make a little dot there because that's where we're going to stop stitching. So we're going to start here and then stop at the dot. So I want to make sure that you do have that little dot to remind you, or put a pin there, whichever you prefer. Okay, now once we have it all pinned, what we're going to do is we're going to head to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch starting at the dot. We're going to work our way up the front, along the top of the shoulder, down the arm. We are not stitching our side seam. This seam here is going to be at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. However, along the bottom, we're going to stitch to the dot using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and trim off some of this seam allowance from the front. You also want to make sure to trim at the corners. And then I'm also going to trim around the arm. Now, before we turn this right side out, I want you to take your lining part and turn that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and give it a press. This is going to make slip stitching the inside of this much easier after we put the both bodice pieces together. Okay, once you've pressed it, you can use your side seam to pull your bodice to the right side. Now you want to head to your sewing machine and you want to go ahead and understitch as far as you possibly can on your lining side. Okay, once you have both your bodices sewn exactly the same way, we're going to go ahead and place them right sides facing. And we're going to stitch this little triangle that we've created, okay? Want to make sure that you keep your lining from getting stitched because we're going to slip stitch that later. But we're going to go ahead and place our little triangles together, and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch them. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pressed my seam allowance here open, and then I'm going to tuck it each side under the lining. Now your lining pieces should meet. You're going to go ahead and slip stitch this closed. Now that we have our bodice attached at the center front, we're going to go ahead and create a casing for our elastic. So along the bottom edge, we're going to stitch a 1/2 inch from the edge to create a casing. So I've cut my elastic using my elastic guide pattern piece. We're going to go ahead and insert our elastic. I'm going to use this little gadget, but you can just use a safety pin. Okay, we're going to go in one opening and out the other side, but you want to make sure that you don't lose the tail end of your elastic. Okay, now once you see the tail end of your elastic is pretty close, you're going to go ahead and pin it in place so that you don't lose it. Okay, and then you can continue until you reach the other end. Okay, now you can go ahead and secure the other side in place. Now head to your sewing machine and you're going to go ahead and tack your elastic through all layers to make sure that it's nice and secure on both ends. Okay, once you have it secured, I went ahead and gave it a press. We're going to go ahead and set our bodice, our front bodice aside for just a second. And we're going to grab pattern piece number 4, which is our front piece. All right, we're going to go ahead and stitch the center front seam together on our skirt. You'll notice on your pattern piece that you had a little dot here. You're going to go ahead and stitch an inch above that dot and an inch to the other side just to give it some stability. And then you're going to clip into that dot. You don't want to clip past your stitching, okay? So be careful. But you are going to go ahead and slash from that corner to the dot. You're going to do that on both pieces. Now with right sides facing, so let me turn my fabric around. We're going to go ahead and pin along the entire center front of the skirt. Okay, let's head to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to start at the hem and work my way up. And then you have the option of pressing your seam open. I'm going to serge and just press to one side, but that's up to you. Okay, so now that we have our center front seam sewn, I went ahead and serged and then just pressed it to one side. This is a really big piece. I can't get it all on camera. But we're going to go ahead and grab our little inset. I just want to make sure again that you made the little slit, okay, to the dot, and that you have your securing stitch an inch above and an inch on the side. It's just going to help so that the fabric doesn't tear, right? You need a little stability there in that corner. Go ahead and grab your inset. Now with right sides facing, we're going to go ahead and pin. We're going to stitch across the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. The top is the wider part, so you can see it sort of goes up like this. I'm going to go ahead and pin. Okay, we're going to go ahead, stitch across the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and while at the machine, we'll go ahead and understitch. Okay, so before we attach our inset, we need to gather from point to point. So we're going to create 2 rows of gathering stitches. Now go ahead and pull your threads. Okay, now let's grab our insert. With right sides facing and making sure that the more narrower part is down at the bottom, you're going to go ahead, and I like to pin at the bottom first. And then I like to pin the sides. You should have corresponding notches, so you want to line those up and pin there. You can give yourself a couple more pins if you need to. I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to find my notches, align those, and pin. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and work on the corner. I'm going to turn this over so it's facing me a bit. I'm going to continue pinning along the bottom. And then you have that little slash spread that we did, so that makes it easy. You're going to go ahead and just pin the other side. You'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and distribute my gathers. Okay, now we're going to head to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch down one side, along the bottom, and the other side, making sure that we pivot at the corners. Okay, so this is what the inset looks like when it's in place. I'm going to show you on the other side so you can see I have gone ahead and serged around the side or down the sides and across the bottom, and then I pressed my seams out and down so that my inset is nice and flat. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our bodice with right sides facing. You're going to place your bodice over the top, and we're going to go ahead and pin. You want to make sure that your edges are matching up. And you have notches. You have notches on this piece, and you have a notch on your bodice as well. So you want to make sure that you match those up and pin. Then I'm going to continue pinning the rest of it. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, we're going to head to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch these together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we have our front bodice completed. We're going to go ahead and set this aside for a second. We're going to grab our back and our side back of our skirt. Okay, so I have my back and my side back laid on top of each other. Right sides are facing. You have one side that has double notches. That's the side that we're going to be stitching together, okay? So let's go ahead and match up those double notches, and we're gonna pin. Now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're gonna start at the hem and we're gonna work our way up. Okay, now that my side back and my back are sewn together, we're gonna go ahead and grab one of our back pieces. Now one side is your center back. The way to note that is that your side back, the notch is higher than the notch on your center back, right? Because we have a zipper here. I also, just because sometimes it's easier to mark with something, I gave myself a little dot on the center back piece, on the skirt back piece, just so I can make sure. You also can tell because your side back piece is wider than the center back piece, right? So I want to just make sure that you are pinning the bodice, the back bodice, to the correct side. So the shorter side, I'll just sort of place it so you guys can see it. Okay, so the shorter side of your back bodice goes to the center back where the zipper is going to be. The higher side should be on the side of your side back piece. So go ahead and place those right sides facing, and you're going to go ahead and pin. I like to pin both my ends first. Now there's a slight curve on the skirt that you don't have on the bodice, so you might have to ease. So I just gave myself some slits into the back bodice, not the skirt, just to make it fit a little better. Okay, and then go ahead and pin. Now you're going to pin your other back to your back bodice to your skirt the same exact way. So go ahead and sew your other skirt back and skirt side back together the way we just did, and go ahead and pin your back bodice the same exact way we just did. And then we're going to stitch again using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we have our back bodice attached to our skirt. As you can see, I went ahead and serged my seam allowance and I pressed my seams up towards the bodice. We're gonna go ahead and work on our zipper. We're not stitching together the center back just yet. So go ahead and grab your invisible zipper. All right, so I have my zipper. I have it right side facing right side, okay? So the zipper pull should be facing your fabric. And what we're gonna do is we're going to pin one side. Now what you want to make sure is that when you're pinning it, like I said, the wrong side of the zipper is up facing you. That's what you should be looking at. And you have the other zipper tape towards your dress. What you don't want to be doing is accidentally, and trust me, it's happened, is stitching your zipper like this where your other zipper tape is facing nowhere, okay? You want to make sure that it's facing inside of your garment. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin this in place. All right, we're gonna go ahead and attach our zipper. So I have gone ahead and serged along my entire center back before I attach my zipper. We're gonna go ahead and place the zipper right side facing, meaning the right side of the zipper is facing your fabric. And you wanna make sure that you're placing it so that the other zipper tape is towards your garment, okay? So you don't wanna place it like this, where your zipper teeth are facing out. So you wanna make sure that you're placing right sides facing, right? The right side of the zipper is facing the right side of your fabric, and that the zipper teeth are in, right, towards the garment. So we're gonna go ahead and pin. If you notice, I have a really long zipper, even though it only calls for 12 to 14 inches. If you've watched any of my sewing tutorials, you know that I always buy extra long zippers. I think it's easier to deal with, especially when you're working around a zipper pull. And then I just trim my excess zipper after the zipper is completely installed, so not before. I'm gonna go ahead and pin my zipper tape in place. And you should have a notch or a dot that you marked where your zipper is going to end. You can sometimes still see your notch even after you serge. As you can see when I pull it open, well, maybe you can't see, but when I pull it open, I can tell that that's where my notch is. So it might be a little easier if you mark it. So I just make a little dot with my marking pen. That way I know exactly where I need to stop. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. We're gonna go ahead and stitch this side of the zipper down. Okay, so we have one zipper tape done. We're gonna go ahead and do the other one. Now, I like to go ahead and mark on my zipper tape exactly where that seam line is, that waist seam, so that I can transfer it to my other zipper tape so that I can make sure that those seam lines completely match up. So I'm gonna go ahead and close my zipper, and then where that seam line is, I'm gonna make a mark onto my zipper tape. Okay, go ahead and open your zipper back up. And now we're gonna go ahead and pin it to the other side. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and pin the other side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab my back piece because I wanna make sure that I'm pinning it correctly. And so we have the zipper tape that's here facing the garment. We have the one that's attached. So I'm gonna go ahead and just grab it. Right sides are facing. The first thing I'm gonna do is make sure that that line that I marked is matching up exactly with that seam line. I'm gonna pin there first. Now I'm gonna go ahead and continue pinning. Again, you know you're doing it correctly if the zipper teeth are facing the garment, not your side seam, or I'm sorry, your center back. Because when you turn this right side, then your zipper teeth are in the correct place. Okay, now we're gonna be starting from the bottom, working our way up, which is always why I buy an extra long zipper so that I don't have to fiddle around with the zipper pull. So let's head on over to the sewing machine. Okay, once both your zipper tapes are in place, you can go ahead and close your zipper. Okay, now we can go ahead and finish closing up the center back. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna continue pinning. Now when we get up here, we're gonna make sure that we're using our zipper foot like we've been using so that we can get all the way up to where we started stitching, right? So we're gonna start at the hem, we're gonna work our way up and stop until we meet the existing stitches. Okay, now that my zipper is completely installed, I can go ahead and cut off the excess. So I cut about 2 inches down from where we stopped stitching. And if you've done it correctly, then you should have an invisible zipper, meaning you don't see it. And you should have a nice, clean, bubble-free end to your zipper. So we're gonna go ahead and grab our back lining pieces. Again, mine is the same exact fabric. I'm gonna open up my zipper just a bit so I can work a little easier. What we're gonna do is we're gonna place these right sides facing. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin. And you should have your dots, right, where we're leaving an opening for our strap. Either dots, I like to give myself notches. I just think it's easier to see sometimes. So I'm gonna place my next pin where I'm going to stop stitching. I'm gonna place the other pin on the other side of that opening, right? So that I know that between these two pins, I am not stitching. And then I'm gonna open out my zipper tape. Okay, let's do the other side. Okay, we're gonna head to the sewing machine. What we're gonna do is we're going to start stitching. We're gonna stop and back stitch at one of your dots. Then we're going to continue on the other side where the other dot is, back stitch again, and then stitch to the end, and then back stitching. You're gonna do the same thing for both sides. Okay, once we've done the top, we're gonna go ahead and also stitch down the zipper. So we're gonna go ahead, open this out, make sure that you're opening out your zipper tape so that the edges are meeting. Okay, so I have also turned under the seam allowance along the bottom of the back bodice lining on both sides. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin our center backs closed, right? So we have a nice clean finish. Okay, now go to your sewing machine. We're gonna head to the sewing machine and we're gonna stitch this down. Now we wanna make sure that we don't hit our zipper teeth, so we're gonna be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, now before we turn this to the right side, I'm gonna go ahead and clip into that corner, remove some of that excess. Okay, you're gonna do the other side. Okay, go to your ironing table and give this all a good press. Okay, so now that we have our lining stitched down along the zipper and we have our pressed edge on the lining, we can go ahead and do our straps. So what we're gonna do is you're going to crisscross your straps. You're gonna put one in each opening. And I'm just gonna pin it in place. You should have dots so that you know where to stop, and you can adjust this if it's not fitting after we go ahead and try this on. Okay, so once you have your straps pinned in place, we're gonna temporarily just, and you can base this or you can just pin it, and you're gonna try it on so that you can at least see if the straps are exactly where you want them to be. So I'm just gonna pin along that 5/8 of an inch. And you don't have to do the entire side. I'm only really doing just where the bodice is, really. Okay, so once you have it pinned, go on and try it on. Make sure that the straps are where you want them to be. You can either do this wrong side out the way I have, or you can do it right side out. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. If you based it, then it's easier for you to try it on right side out. I just want to make sure that the straps are going to be in a comfortable place for me. So go ahead, try this on, and then we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, so I've tried my dress on. I just had to make a slight adjustment to my straps, but now I have them pinned where I want them. So I'm just gonna open this back up and stitch them in place, connecting the stitching line to the existing stitching line and secure my straps in place. I'm gonna do that for both sides. Now that I have my straps secured, what I want to make sure and do is that I close this opening here, right? And so you have two options. You can slip stitch this closed, or you can stitch in the ditch, which is what I'm gonna do. So I'm just gonna place some pins. I wanna make sure that the folded edge is just past my stitching line so I can make sure that I'm catching the lining. I like to stitch on the right side of my fabric because you need to be able to see where your ditch is. So I'm just gonna place 3 pins there, and I'm gonna head to the sewing machine. Okay, so before we close up our side seam, we need to add our pockets. So go ahead and grab all 4 of your pocket pieces. I'm gonna attach them to my back first, and you should have some notches. You're gonna go ahead and align those and pin. Okay, you're gonna pin your other pockets to your fronts, and then we're gonna go ahead and stitch our pocket down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so I have all 4 pockets attached and I pressed them out. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin our entire side seam together. I'm gonna start first by pinning my pocket, just aligning those. I'm gonna put a pin where I need to stop so that we have that opening, right? I'm gonna do the same thing at the bottom. Okay, now I'm gonna continue pinning. Now you have notches here, so you wanna make sure that you're aligning those notches. This top portion is meant to extend. Okay, now I'm just gonna go ahead and pin around my pocket so that I can go ahead and do that all at the machine at one time. Okay, you're gonna go ahead and pin your other side seam and pocket the same way. Now we're gonna head to the sewing machine and we're gonna start at the hem using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to stitch up until we get to the stopping point for the pocket opening, back stitch, cut our thread, start back up at the following dot, back stitch, and then continue to the top. Then after that, since we have already pinned it, we can go ahead and stitch around the pocket. Okay, so I also went ahead and serged around my pocket, so now everything is done there. Okay, now go to your ironing table and press your seam open, press your pocket to the front, cut off any loose threads that you might need to, and then all we have left to do is to finish the hem. So before we get to the hem, we just need to finish off this little piece here, right? So what we're gonna do is you're gonna do a double fold. So you're gonna fold once, fold it again, and then you're going to slip stitch this in place, or you could do a top stitch if you want to. All right, guys, so all we have left to do is the hem. I've gone ahead and serged all the way around mine. You're gonna go ahead and finish by doing a narrow hem. So you're gonna do one fold and then a second fold and stitch close to the edge, but try it on, make sure that it's the length that you want. After you're done with that, you are all done. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this sew along. Please make sure and leave me a comment. And if you make my pattern, please tag me on Instagram at Mimi G Style so I can see all of your amazing makes. Until next time, peace.